Good afternoon, everybody. We will start shortly. We're just waiting for another few minutes for a few other people to join, and then we will get going. Thanks.
Hey, I just logged in quickly. Just hold on. Right?
Okay. Got some more information. From Cecil. He says there's three people that deal with the
Good afternoon, everybody. It's officially 12 o'clock, just after 12. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Pietri. I am the project assistant at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group and one of the many awesome faces behind NPOwer. Today, we will be talking about stress, as you are all aware. This is just part one of our three-part stress series that we are running for the next 3 months. We are so excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for everybody who could join us today. Just a reminder to please keep your cameras and your audios muted for the time being, unless Senzi asks you to please put your cameras on. We're going to try and be as interactive as possible. We are so lucky to have Senzi with us today. Senzi Kilishongwe is the volunteer training coordinator at SADAG. She is in charge of all the volunteers at SADAG. She has such a massive influence on all of us. And we are so blessed to have her here today. Senzi will be taking us through a few things about stress, all the basics. That's what we're trying to do here today, is just lay the foundation about stress. Just on a side note as well, the recording will be available online after the meeting. In the next couple of days, I will also be sending some of the slides also via an emailer to everybody that's here. Yeah, feel free to please ask any questions in the chat box. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the session. So if there are any queries or questions, please just pop them in the chat box and we will go from there. So without further ado, Senzi, please will you come show us your beautiful face? Welcome and thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Petri. I am honored to be invited into yet another NPOwer webinar, and I really hope that we are all going to learn quite a lot. And stress is something that we all go through, and just by a show of hands, and I'd like to just see on the participation, on the chat, just Petri, if you can mute everybody.
I am sorry, Cynthia, I'm busy doing that.
Thank you. Before we even go to this question, I would like, by a show of hands, anyone who can say today that they have never, and I will wait, that they have never experienced stress in their lives. If you feel like you've never experienced stress in your life, put it on the chat box or put the emoji and let's see. All right. It is quite evident that all of us have experienced stress, that all of us have gone through this journey of life, and that means that we will be stressed out. And today we're going to just look at what does that mean and how do we then deal with stresses in general. The first question that I'm going to pose to everyone is, what are some of the stresses that you are aware of? Please put it on the chat box and I will open the chat box and see. What are some of the stresses are you aware of? And just think about the people that are around you right now with COVID-19, with all of the changes, stresses that you have gone through as well. Let us look at the most relevant stresses that we may have right now. University stress, work stress. Joanne is saying finances. And I know that with being part of an NGO, this is quite a big one, the finances, right? Work stress, working under pressure, applying for schools and waiting for those results, relationships, stressful and very anxiety provoking. Toddlers, having kids, being a mom, being a dad is very stressful as well. The things we see with our work. There's also things that happen on social media, things that happen on TV that really does affect us when it comes to stress. And all of this just shows that stress is a normal part of our day-to-day life, and we will experience stress inevitably. Now, if stress is something that we will inevitably experience, I think it is important for us to know what it is and how to identify it so that we are able to better deal with stress, right? According to this beautiful presentation, a stressor is something or a situation that causes a state of strain and or tension, right? So this means that when you're feeling stressed, you might feel it in your body, you might feel it physically, you might also see that there are people around you as well that feel the stress. Stress can be transferred as well, but it does cause a lot of strain and or tension, whether it is in yourself or with relationships, right? What are stresses? Stresses can be school, it can be work, it can be family, it can be relationships, it can be finances, it could be health illnesses, it could be very environmental, and it could be our living situations. And we did see on the chat box that all of this has been mentioned. Can we avoid stress? Probably not. Can we manage stress? I think the answer to that is yes, right? On the chat box now, the second question to you. How does stress make you feel? I know that stress causes stress, right? And I know a lot of people will think that. But when you feel stress, how do you feel psychologically? How do you feel physically? I'd just like to say, and if you're stressed right now, do a self-introspection, do a body evaluation, and tell me how you're feeling. Shirley is saying anxious. Lucy is saying she feels like crying, anxious, tired, disappointed. Someone else is saying overwhelmed, sad, drained, depressed, tired, confused, and angry. And I'm seeing these symptoms that are also similar to each other. Lethargic, bored, defeated, not sure what to do now. I think this is one of the biggest, Joanna, where you really feel like I don't have a direction. I want this to be sorted, but I do not know how to do that. You feel helpless. And then Deliath is also saying not being able to sleep and losing appetite and feeling like you are a failure because of hopelessness and because you really do not know how to move forward. And then some people feel drained and tense. Sleeping issues also come quite a lot in the chat box, where people struggle to sleep. And if you look at all of these symptoms, they do really correlate with symptoms of anxiety, right? Meaning that stress can be quite linked with anxiety until the situation has been sorted out. Now, question back, when you're feeling stress, is this something that you should just leave and let go? Or is it something that you need to address so that you can now pass the state of depression, of helplessness, of feeling stressed? What do you then need to do? And I'd also like to see that on the chat. How do you deal with stress? What do you think is the best way for you to manage stress? Okay, so Ty is saying get the energy to deal with it, right? And this can be very easy to say, like, get over it, do something about it. But we can also be confident with the idea and understanding that it could be difficult. Lena is also saying confront the stress that you're having. You need to address it. Lynn is saying prioritize and make a plan. If it is something that is making your life feel stagnant right now, you can do something about it. And I can tell you this, that you do not always have to manage stress on your own. There are always people around you that can help navigate it. I myself have found that if I share my stressors with somebody else, they are most likely to help me navigate through it, because what I see my stressor as, and it being quite overwhelming, might actually look simple in another person's eyes. And it doesn't have to be a professional. Sometimes writing it down also helps, but confronting it and prioritizing the stressor so that you can get them out of the way is key. And we are definitely going to look at how we can do that, right? Before that, identifying what is now stress. So we looked at what is a stressor. We looked at the different kinds of stressors. What is stress and how do you feel it in your body and in your mind? Stress is a feeling of emotional or physical tension. It can come from any event or thought that makes you feel frustrated, angry, or nervous. And this definition just doesn't end here, right? As we saw on the chat box, there's quite a lot of things and emotions and feelings that stress can make you feel. And the list is quite endless because as individuals, we experience and deal with stress differently. But one thing's for sure, stress will create some kind of tension on your mind, on your body, as well as on your emotions. What kind of stresses do NPOs deal with? Now, this is something interesting. I only have a list of 7 stuff that are here, but I'd also like to hear, what are you dealing with in your workplace right now? I know there's a lack of funding that is throughout all NGOs that we are experiencing. Limited capacity, where we are always short-staffed. I'm also part of an NGO and I know this. And you end up doing so many things as one individual. There's also an issue of burnout where you feel tired because, again, you're working longer hours. And as an individual, you are doing the job of 5 people. Job security. What happens when there no longer is funding? What happens when we no longer have the money to continue with our NGO? There's always increased work demand. There's always funders that we need to satisfy as well so that we can keep the money rolling in. Very important. Family. Our family needs us. They need us healthy. They need us financed. And working in an NGO can steal that away from your family, which then causes stress. Then there's food security, health, especially if we cannot afford things like EAP, team building events, it does become quite stressful. Now I'm going to look at the chat box and see, what are you guys experiencing in the NPO sector? Manini is saying scarcity of resources. Absolutely. Where we find that we always have to improvise to be able to do certain things. Whereas if we had the money, we would be able to afford some of the things. Burnout, of course, and Ty is saying unfairness. I think this is something that is throughout all organizations where you feel like you're not being rewarded the way that you want to be rewarded, or that you're not being seen, or that some other person is being favored more than yourself. Demotivated staff. Lemise is saying demotivated staff, and within reason, because sometimes there isn't enough motivation except for if you're doing your work from the heart and your reason is just to give back. Other than that, motivation may be very scarce, and it can be a huge stressor to wake up every morning to a workplace that you are feeling demotivated in. Lack of support and resources. I could not, and I'm going to read this, Dalia, if you are okay with it. She says that I could not cope at my job. Depression and anxiety got the best of me. Maybe low self-esteem as well. So she left and went to work on the mental health space. And these are the things that we see both in corporate, in NGO, and in quite a lot of sectors. Joanne is saying hands are tied and the calls come all the time, and we cannot save them all. And Joanna, I think this is really frustrating, and I'm with you on this one, where you really want to help, but you're so limited because there's so little people to do the amount of work that you want to do and to go to the extents that you want to go to. She also says that we are an open admission animal shelter, which means we have to make hard calls. And then the attacks from the public about the calls we have to make, oh my God. And that is because not a lot of people see what happens behind the scenes. Not a lot of people see your efforts, which does become discouraging at times. Bonnie's saying people do not understand boundaries. And I can sense a bit of frustration here from Bonnie. But yes, boundaries are quite important when you are in an NPO sector, because a lot of times we do not have those boundaries. And that is why we end up feeling burnt out and tired and demotivated and all of these other things that we have mentioned. Now, very important, good stress versus bad stress. We should all agree that stress can be good, yeah? Because without stress, we wouldn't have the ambitions that we have. We wouldn't achieve the things that we have achieved so far. And that is why stress is a need. We need stress to survive. But how do we know if stress is good or bad for us? Right, we'll start with good stress. Good stress is very short term, meaning that it pushes you to a short-term goal, you reach it, and you're able to move on to another goal and reach it and move on to another goal. Good stress is kind of like a motivation instead of a demotivation. It inspires you to move on, to go on, and to pursue. It also improves performance because you're putting pressure on yourself so that you can produce good results that reflect your ability and also make you proud of the work that you're doing. It creates a good feeling of accomplishment. You know, when you stress about something and you work hard at it, and then when you finally do it and it shows good results, you feel good and you feel proud of yourself. And that is what healthy stress is supposed to give you, that sense of a good feeling, being proud of yourself. It is within your coping abilities. So I always say to people, never take on what you cannot do. Do not overdo the things. Even though your heart is in a good place, if you see that you do not have capacity to do them, don't do them, because immediately they will turn into bad stress. It also creates a good growth mindset where you will always be motivated to grow, always be motivated to move to the next level all of the time. Now, looking at bad stress, which is normally very distressing, and it is the opposite of what good stress is. Bad stress is overwhelming, it is demotivating, and it can lead to mental illnesses like burnout, like depression, and like anxiety. It is outside of your coping abilities, like what I have said, where you feel as though you really cannot reach your goal because there's so much on your plate and it is impossible for you to fix. It can also disrupt functioning and performance, because imagine yourself wanting to do something, but there's just so many other things that you need to do. So they block your performance, they block your progress, and they make it really difficult for you to achieve the things that you want to achieve. And they trigger fight or flight. This one is something that I see quite a lot on NGOs, where people literally do what comes. Everything is an emergency. Everything it needs to be done now. And there is never planning. There is never strategic meetings, because everything is done on a fight or flight basis. That is not healthy, because that is where you start feeling depressed, burnt out, and anxious, and you are not even sure where those emotions are coming from. Bad stress can lead to what we call chronic stress. Now, chronic stress is a long-term illness where somebody does suffer from stress. I'm going to define it better, okay? Chronic stress is a psychological response caused by long-term exposure to one or more stresses that people encounter on a day-to-day basis. So if every day you are experiencing being in a toxic environment, you wake up, you go to that toxic environment, day in, day out, you are with those toxic people and they stress you. It may lead to chronic stress because it is long-term and it is there. and nothing is being done about it. Chronic stress can also lead to someone feeling pressured and or overwhelmed for a very long period of time, where even though you are trying so hard to manage other stresses, it becomes hard because your mind and your body has been programmed to deal with stress in a negative way. And it is always anxiety provoking, and you always don't know how to manage stresses, and you never have good stress because everything that puts pressure on you, everything that worries you is translated as this big bad thing that is hard to manage. Chronic stresses include financial strain, interpersonal stress, work stress, and caregiving. And they have been identified as associated with disease and mortality. What does this mean, guys? That you can actually die from chronic stress if you do not manage it. So do not take stress lightly, especially people that feel physical symptoms like migraines and neck-related issues and tension muscles and heart-related issues due to stress. It can take you to the grave unless you learn right now how to better manage this. Let's look at the symptoms of chronic stress. It is aches and pains, insomnia or sleepiness. And why insomnia or sleepiness? Because when you go to your quiet place at night, all of those thoughts come. You start thinking about everything that is stressing you without a way out, without a solution. And they build on and on and on, and they cause an emotional distress. You will also see a change in social behavior. You will also see low energy, unconfused or unfocused or clouded thinking. A change in a lot. Or when I'm stressed, I don't eat. That shouldn't be normal. You should be able to treat stress as something that is very short term and that will pass, and be able to manage how you eat and what you eat. You will also see an increase in substance abuse because you wanna not feel all of these emotions that come with stress, and you also wanna stop thinking. I've heard that these racing thoughts, but what happens when you're sober again? They come back. You will also see a change in emotional responses to others and emotional withdrawal, where you find that your relationship with your partner or with your children or with your colleagues is close to non-existent when you are going through stress. You need to be bigger than the stress and still maintain those relationships. You will also see ongoing stress reactions that can interfere with productivity, relationships, as well as health. But this being stuck, something that a lot of us did actually mention on the chat box, feeling hopeless and feeling like there isn't a way of moving forward. And other warning signs of stress include eating or sleeping too much or too little, pulling away from people and things, having low or no energy, and having unexplained aches and pains, such as constant stomach aches or headaches, feeling helpless or hopeless, and finding yourself going through excessive smoking, drinking, or usage of drugs, which is something that we just spoke about, substance abuse, and anxiety, worrying a lot and feeling guilty, and sometimes not even knowing why you're feeling all of this. Thinking of hurting or killing yourself. This is when now it has become very bad, and this could be a sign of a mental illness or something like depression. Having difficulty readjusting to home or work life, because most often when you cannot manage stress, these two worlds intertwine. You find that when you're at home, you're doing work stuff. When you're at work, you're doing home stuff, and that might affect you big time. Now, the interesting part, and before I even read this, let's go back to the chat box. How do you personally deal with day-to-day stress? I'd like to see what you have to say, and maybe we can learn from each other. We all experience stress. How do you deal with stress on a day-to-day basis? Okay, Ty is saying breathing exercises. Joanne is saying lots of coffee. Okay. Lemise is saying positive self-talk, walks and going out, walking my dog, yes. Singing, how's it saying singing? Very interesting. Prayer and meditation. I think spirituality is quite important if it's something that you believe in. Joanne is saying reading, and reading is very helpful because it helps you to just diverge those thoughts and focus on something else and enter into another person's character. Nobuntu is saying that she sees her doctor. Journaling, cooking. Monica is saying jogging as well. Ashika is saying watching cartoons. That could be very interesting with a lot of laughs in between. Talking to a friend. And yoga, something that I've always wanted to try. And now I'm really motivated to. Connecting with nature, going to parks or hiking. And I cannot emphasize how beautiful and stress relieving being in nature is. Another person is saying eating chocolate. And if that makes you happy, you do it. Spa booking. Flavia, we work in an NGO and maybe we cannot afford it, but it's a good one as well. Going to gym and boxing, Tandazile. This is something that I've heard from quite a lot of males where they use boxing to just release that tension. Dorothy is saying prioritizing family and not working at night, which is what I've been talking about. Having to find yourself intertwining between work and home. It is important to have boundaries and know what to do and when to do it. Do not work when you're at home and do not play when you're at work. That will help you to manage stress and it will help you with prioritizing what is important at the necessary time. Okay, what is here? You will find that it will be a repetition of everything that you have mentioned because everything you mentioned is quite good and correct. Body relaxation exercises like taking warm baths, breathing, going for walks, going for hiking, meditation, sitting in the sun outside, getting some fresh air, listening to some soft and soothing music. Physical exercise is quite important because it doesn't only release the tension, but it is also healthy for you. And if you exercise not just your body, but your mind also becomes healthy. Meditation as well as counseling. And we will look at where you can actually get the counseling from. Right. Changing perceptions and expectations. I love this. So sometimes you might feel as though a situation is very bad. But if you look at it in a positive eye, you might find that it's actually not that bad. And some expectations are a bit too pressurizing on either us, the organization, or other people. And just taking the pressure from those expectations can also help you. Breaking tasks into small, manageable, and achievable tasks is very important because then they become realistic goals and they are more attainable and they are more doable, and it makes you feel like you're constantly winning instead of having a big task. And when you do these small things, you feel like you're not getting to the end goal, where else you are, but you're not seeing it. So the big goal is important, but break it down into small day-to-day tasks that will one day lead you into this big, beautiful imagination and expectation that you may have. Avoid procrastination. I cannot emphasize this enough. I know that being in an NGO makes it difficult to plan and to strategize, but start today. Emphasize it in your team. Speak about it in the workplace. Plan and execute, and make sure that everything you plan in the morning is what is really attainable for the day, so that you can tick it off as you go along, and tomorrow morning you start with new things. Set boundaries. If you knock off at 5, try your best to knock off at 5 and not at 6 and not at 7. Never compromise your values and or beliefs. This is important because this is something that is very attached to you emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And if you give that away, it might affect you in ways that you don't even realize. Schedule me time. And me time is very, very specific to you. Some people see me time as painting their nails. Some people is being at the gym. Some people is reading. Some people is just meditation. Some people is just being alone in your room watching movies. But it's just you deciding that now I'm going to do me. And I'm not going to compromise me and my time. And avoid caffeine, especially if you struggle with anxiety and chronic stress. Try not to take caffeine as a way of coping, because this might elevate physical symptoms of anxiety as well as racing thoughts, which is something that you do not need, especially if you are in a stressful situation. How do you know that it is time for you to get help for stress? And a lot of people always say, it's just stress. I don't need to get help for it. But how do you know that you have to get stress? If this was up to me, I would just say, if you experience stress, if you're a human being, because you're a human being, you experience stress, get help, right? Make sure that there is a professional that you speak to, or friends that you speak to, or self-help techniques that you always dedicate for managing day-to-day stress, so that you do not have to find yourself being diagnosed with a mental illness, which is now even harder to manage. So because we are all human beings here, we all experience stress. It is important to know our triggers and also learn how to deal with stress on a day-to-day basis. But let's see what's here. If you have any of the symptoms of stress and have tried one or more of the self-help tips that we have discussed, and you haven't found relief, seek professional help. This means that if you have tried to do it on your own, but you have not really been successful in coping, it is time to then seek professional help. If you feel overwhelmed and feel like you can't manage your emotions and stresses on your own, seek help. Counselors and mental health therapists are trained professionals who can find ways to help you cope and reduce the effects of emotional stress and help you see things in a better light and instill hope, because that is what we need. What kind of help can you get for stress? Now, this depends on what you can afford, what is accessible to you, but the list is endless. You can see a psychologist, a counseling psychologist. You can see a psychiatrist if you are in need of medication. You can see team members or colleagues for debriefing, loved ones for conversation and sharing, as well as support. There's also registered counselors, which are cheaper than psychologists, but they can also help you with counseling and help you just to be in conversation. There are NPOwer counselors that you can contact on the NPOwer helpline. And if your workplace has got an EAP service, utilize it, because then you get the opportunity to talk and in essence, get support. What are the benefits of managing stress on a day-to-day basis? Physical health gets better. You have more energy and stamina. Your emotions become stabilized. You find that you now become a happier person. You become more positive, and you are always able to see positivity, even in negativity. There's always an ability to focus as well. Concentration improves. You are more able to focus as I'm talking. You're able to follow through in conversation. That is what it will help you with. Now I'm going to open the floor for questions, or for anyone that wants to share how they have coped with stress and what they have done to manage their stress. You can just put your hand up and we will nominate you, or I have Petri that is watching the chat box and she will just let us know what your questions are. Please feel free, we still do have some time. Ask the questions and Let us help one another.
Thank you so much for that, Zens. We so appreciate your insightfulness on stress and how it all impacts us to such an extent. Again, like Senzi says, if anyone's got a question, please raise your hand or drop a comment in the chat box. We are here to help you. We're here to get you through these difficult times, especially, in the NPO sector. Since the start of COVID, it's been exceptionally stressful. And that is one of the reasons why we are having one of the, this webinar series, is so that we can help you manage these, these factors better, and to manage stress within yourself and your team a lot more effectively. So Senzi, one of the questions that I previously got you is that I know you mentioned caffeine. And, as we all, Senzi and myself, also love a good cup of coffee. What the one person asked, what do they drink instead of coffee? So Senzi can also go into this. It does feed into anxiety. For me personally, it is difficult to give up your cup of coffee, but if you feel like it's negatively impacting you, maybe have one good cup of coffee in the morning and then kind of just monitor your intake. Senzi, I don't know if you've got any ideas on that one.
Absolutely. I think it is also very important to check, what does it do to your body? How do you feel after taking caffeine? That helps you to know what your limit is. If you're feeling very overwhelmed, rather not take the caffeine and rather opt for rooibos tea or chamomile tea or just plain water, because it is always healthier.
So like I say, it's not necessary for you to completely cut out your coffee. It literally just depends on the effect that it has on you. But if it is having a negative effect on you, maybe just limit yourself, like Senzi says. It's sometimes just healthier, and it'll also feed into helping, cope with these things and not feel so anxious sometimes. Okay, Senzi, we've got a raised hand. I think it's Ike.
Hi, Ike.
Hi, good day, Senzi. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good. Look, I wanted to check. Does the substance abuse induce stress? No? How would you differentiate if this was substance induced or it was, there before, even before? Is it possible?
You know what? With substance abuse, it's normally the other way around. We start taking substances because we're stressed, and then we start being dependent on the substances, and then they feed onto the stress. And then you find that now, without the substance, you then start getting stressed because you are dependent on it. So it feeds onto the stress, but normally the trigger is the stress that then now leads you to taking substances.
No, thank you very much. Now tell me, will it then be advisable for a person to see a psychiatrist for medication, or maybe the person must deal? Because now what we are saying, one would end up with a dual diagnosis. So would it be advisable for a person to be on medication, or must you perhaps deal with the substances first?
What I normally advise is first see a clinical psychologist that will help you evaluate and see where you're at. If there is a need for medication, you will be referred to a psychiatrist to take on that path. But the first step is to see a mental health practitioner for assessments and evaluations.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Sans. Thank you, Ike, for your very insightful question. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Is there anything else that someone is needing? There was a question on the chat box saying that the team needs help, the team of plus minus 44. Yes, NPOwer is able to assist you. There are various services that NPOwer have that are not only available to individuals, but teams as well. Devashni has put the email address in the chat box. Please drop us an email if you are needing group sessions, individual sessions. Please send us an email or give us a call. We are here to help you and just give you the help and support that you so desperately need during these times. We understand that things are hectic. We understand that that life is a little bit stressful at the moment, and that's why we are here to try and help and support you as much as we can. We currently do. There's another question. Lena, NPOwer has an online support group. It runs once a month, the second Friday of every month.
No, listen, hey.
If you have a look on the NPOwer social media, via the emailers that we will also send to you after this meeting. There is a monthly support group already available to you, which you can join whenever you feel. All right, Sans, there's no other questions I don't see here. So let me throw a question at you. Sans, like, it's so difficult sometimes to know where to draw the line when you are stressed, especially when you are so caring and giving within the NPO sector. What advice would you give to someone who just feels like they don't know how to choose what's important, what's not, and it's making them feel so extremely stressed?
I will always say that the first thing or person to choose is yourself and your mental health. Because like we always say, you can never be able to pour from an empty cup. If you don't not feed this person and take care of this person, you will never be able to sufficiently give to other people as well. So that is where your measure should be. If you're feeling tired, examine that. Why am I feeling tired? If I'm feeling worried, take care of that worry. I'm feeling stressed, take care of that and fix it where it needs to be fixed and address it where it needs to be addressed so that you can be able to give to other people and have boundaries. Your family needs you, your relationships need you. Give to an extent that you can only be able to give.
Thank you so much for that, Sans, and that's such great advice. We always say that at NPOwer and at SADAG is you cannot pour from an empty cup. We understand that there's the need, especially in the nonprofit sector, to continuously give and give and give, and it is difficult because that's who we are as people. But unfortunately, that cup is going to run empty, and you cannot give if your cup is not full. So the first step in assessing anything is to look after your own mental health. I believe it was one of our board members, Dr. Zamo Mbele, not doctor, clinical psychologist Zamo Mbele, who said the best cure for burnout is prevention. Try and get yourself not to be burnt out. Try and get yourself not to be in a space where you are feeling constantly overwhelmed. Look after yourself each and every day. And if it is difficult, 10 minutes a day can make such a huge difference in how you experience things and just help you replenish that little bit of energy you need just to look after yourself. Since I don't know about this one, do you have a specific tool to assess stress? I don't think we have a specific tool. I think it's just about looking at yourself. Since I don't know if you have any kind of inputs on that one.
I think, yes, Petri, assessing yourself. You know yourself better than anyone. If you're feeling tension, feeling headaches, you're feeling strain here, and you're having a lot of thoughts, it might mean that you're stressed. So it's about getting to know yourself and knowing that right now you are not okay. And also it is important, just to add on to your previous point, Petri, it is important to know how much you're doing and tap yourself in the back for that. And say to yourself that I'm proud of you, you're doing your best and you're doing well. Do not only focus on the bad things that are happening, also focus on the good things that are happening in your life and the good things that you are doing. That will also help you emotionally.
Another great resource to have is if you are feeling, or, you know, I think the first step in this whole thing is to realize that if you are asking these questions about how do I know if I'm stressed, it's probably an indication that you are stressed already. If you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're asking yourself these questions, what am I doing? Why am I feeling a certain way? It's probably an indication that you are already stressed and you're already feeling a certain level of stress or even burnout. That is also why we have this amazing program. Please have a look at the NPOwer website. There are all of our previous webinars with psychologists, with experts that give us expert advice, completely free online. All of it is on there. There's burnout, there's stress, there's all kinds of things on there. And if you are needing that extra bit of help, have a look on the website. There are so many materials available to you at the click of a button. And then if you do need further help and you don't know where to start, then you give us a call. That's why we're here. All right, Sains. Let's see. What are some of the other self-help tips? I know we covered some of them in the webinar. What are some of the other self-help tips that we can maybe do? Something that that people that don't really know how to address it. Let's say someone's never experienced stress before. What do you think would be the first thing to do?
First of all, I don't think there's anyone that has never experienced stress before. That's a given. But I think because we covered quite a lot, I want to talk about what not to do to avoid, to manage stress. First of all, do not manage stress, especially if it is stress that is caused by somebody else, like a colleague or a family member, through gossip and through spreading that stress onto other people as well. But make it in a sense where you open up and you share what are the things that are making you feel sad, and make sure that the people that you're sharing with are people that are able to contain you emotionally and not just add to the fire. Do not use substances to try and manage stress, because it can lead to substance abuse disorder or an addiction. I think that is quite important. And do not use food to manage stress. Food is meant to keep us alive, not to help us manage stress. This could lead to overeating or undereating, which might affect you and your diet and your body and your nutrition as a whole. Try to reflect on the self-help tips that we spoke about to know what are the healthy ways of managing stress.
I think, I'd say it's also what's an important thing to know here is that, like I said, like we both said earlier, it's important to know yourself and to keep in touch with yourself. And I think that's maybe the starting point for many on this webinar. I think if you have, if you get into a routine, or if you haven't started it before, maybe it's a good time to start now. Get into the routine of checking in with yourself every single day. Even if you are stressed at the moment, you can kind of check in and be like, okay, I'm stressed today. Ask yourself, how are you feeling today? Am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling sad? Am I, whatever feeling you are feeling today? The important thing to remember is that it's okay not to be okay. You're allowed to feel these things. And when you know that if you do this check-in every day, you get to know how you're feeling within yourself every single day. When you then suddenly get an upsurge of stress, for example, you know exactly when you know, that's exactly when you know that something is wrong. And that's maybe a starting point for you. Maybe just do a day check-in with yourself. Okay, today I'm feeling sad. Okay, I'm going to live with my stress today, or with my sadness today, and use that as a benchmark. Maybe that's a starting point for someone, just to check in with yourself, see what the benchmark is, and then kind of go from there so that you know when things get worse.
Absolutely, I fully agree. So you're always a step ahead.
You're trying to prevent it before it becomes a bigger issue.
Exactly.
And like Cindy says, this is oftentimes we don't even realize that we're starting to all of a sudden drink 3 glasses of wine instead of 2. We're eating 5 meals a day instead of just 3. I think, specifically, or not specifically, but I know that sometimes it doesn't happen with this big bang, it doesn't happen quickly. It happens gradually, where all of a sudden you find yourself feeling extremely stressed and extremely burnt out. But if you do these things every single day and you get to know yourself within your work, and maybe that's like I say, that's maybe a starting point.
Absolutely.
All right, is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Pop it in the chat box, raise your hand. Otherwise we can end off the session or a little bit earlier today. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Yes. Hi. Roberta.
I'm struggling with the taxisman in traffic. It's causing me a lot of anxiety and stress. And I don't like who I become when I'm sitting behind that wheel, because they get to me. I allow them to get to me. So what tips do you have, please, ma'am?
Okay, this is a very interesting one, right? There are stresses that we cannot get rid of, okay? And it is okay to acknowledge that taxis will always be there on the road, but how you behave and how you let that affect you is very important. You are aware of what it's making you feel like and how it makes you behave, which is it's a very good sign that you are on your way to managing it better. Now, the next step is saying, I'm not going to allow them to do this because I'm expecting that they'll always be there. It's about how you then control yourself and your emotions to say, it's okay, I will wait. I'm not going to try and overtake them. I will wait. And then when another one comes, I will wait. It helps you to be calmer and to be better. And if you know that they're always on the right lane, try to keep your left all the time. so that you do not get disturbed by them. But they're not going to go away. They will always be there. Try to navigate yourself around the stressor that will always be present.
I think the important, aspect there, Roberta, thank you so much for that, Senzi, by the way, is that I like to, with these kinds of things that are always existing that really do tend to rub us up in the wrong way, I like to think of it in a way as changeables and non-changeables. There are certain things in life that we can have control over or, can manage more effectively than others. And in this instance, something that isn't or can be perceived as an unchangeable is something that's really upsetting you. Like Senzi says, maybe try, and even though it is going to be a little bit difficult for you, I'm sure, maybe just try and focus, like Lynn says in the chat box, on your music. Maybe just try and distract yourself in a different kind of way rather than focusing on the problem at hand. That might be one way of just facing it. All right, Sens, we've got another question. It's Tepo. Tepo, what's your question?
Thank you very much. I wanted to check, is it advisable to maybe take chamomile tea during the day? Because maybe from the information that I understand chamomile can do, or its properties, is that it can calm you down and then also make you feel very sleepy. So I just wanted to check.
I think with chamomile tea, again, it depends on you. For example, myself, it calms me down emotionally and psychologically, but definitely doesn't make me sleepy. If it is something that makes you sleepy personally, I'd rather you don't take it and you take something else like rooibos tea that doesn't make you sleepy. But it really does depend. Petri, does it make you sleepy by any chance?
I think it honestly just depends on the day. It's so hard to say that there's one specific thing that calms us down or that makes us sleepy. I think for me, it definitely depends on what's happened during the day. If I've had an exceptionally stressful, busy day at work, it takes me longer to calm down, even if I do try and drink chamomile tea. So I think, like Senzi says, Tepo, it's pretty much what your personal preference is. If it doesn't tend to make you sleepy during the day and you find it's a good exchange for caffeine, for example, go ahead. If you enjoy it, maybe it's good, replace that caffeine habit with chamomile, because I'm not too sure actually if there's too much caffeine in it. But again, like Senzi says, you also don't want to be sitting at your desk sleeping the whole day. If you are needing something or another replacement, like Senzi says, look into rooibos. There are so many teas available at the moment, green tea, even though it's not particularly appetizing. But it all depends on what you kind of feel and how it affects you. I think it's also about trial and error when it comes to anything, whether it's chamomile tea, whether it's about dealing with stress. See what works for you, try it out. If it doesn't work, there are many, many options and many, many things that you can do to try and help yourself.
Or just drink water.
Or just drink water, 100%. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question? Otherwise, we might end off a little bit earlier. Okay, we have Ty who's asking in the chat box, any advice for a family member who gets extremely angry because of things happening you cannot control? So I think this pretty much ties into what Senzi was saying to Roberta about the traffic. Senzi, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
It is basically the same thing. Again, protecting yourself, because you cannot help someone who doesn't see a problem with their behavior. But how does it affect you? How does their behavior affect you? And how can you then protect yourself from that kind of behavior? You can look at things like intervention, speaking to them, but until they see a problem, until they want to get help, there is absolutely nothing that you can do. It is more around protecting yourself and making sure that you are not in the same environment when they are in that state, because you come first.
100%, I can agree with that. And I think also, what we need to realize is people who work in the nonprofit sector, sometimes the little piece that we have outside of our jobs is the little piece that we have for ourselves. So if you are finding yourself in a situation with a family member where the emotional reactions are 100% affecting you, that's definitely an instance to take control of the situation, whether you have to remove yourself from the situation, whether you have to change your attitudes towards the situation. If it is personally upsetting to you, you can only change the way that you react to it. You cannot change how someone else is reacting to a certain situation. You can give them advice like we are trying to give you now, We've said to you there's changeables, there's unchangeables. Beyond that, if it is disturbing your peace and you're finding it that it really does affect you, you need to change the way and get yourself out of that situation, I would suggest, to protect your own peace and fill your own cup. All right. All right, cool. I think there are no more questions. If there are no more questions, I think we can end off there today. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us for this incredible session. Thank you so much again, Senzi, for joining us today and for being the beautiful light in our lives today.
Thank you.
Like I mentioned earlier, the session has been recorded and will be shared with you guys within the next few days via email. We will make the slides available to you. And if you guys are needing any kind of help, individual, group, with your business, on your own, whatever you need, please reach out to NPOwer. We've got social media pages, Facebook and Twitter, a wonderful website full of resources, helpline, SMS, email. We have posted it all in the chat box. If you do need anything, please reach out to us. We are here to help you manage these difficult times. That's why we are here. So yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Zenz. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and we will see you soon.